Nobody expected sports writer Marcus Reid to attack LeBron James so brutally during the live ESPN broadcast. When the studio fell into complete silence, Reid pointed his finger and shouted, "You're just someone who bounces a ball around, LeBron. Don't try to learn basketball history from me." But LeBron's response was about to shock Reid and every single viewer. But before we dive into this incredible story, let me ask you something. Have you ever been absolutely certain you were right, only to be proven completely wrong? Have you ever underestimated someone so badly that it changed your entire perspective on life? This story is exactly about that. But it's also about something much deeper. It's about the hidden genius that lives inside people we think we know everything about. ESPN's SportsCenter studio was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy. The hum of cameras, the monotonous rhythm of air conditioning, and what nobody knew yet, the electrical tension between two leather chairs that would soon host one of the most memorable confrontations in sports television history. Marcus Reid sat on the edge of his chair, adjusting his tie with the confidence that came from 23 years of experience. Let me paint you a picture of who Marcus Reid was. Harvard diploma hanging proudly in his office. Sports Illustrated background that opened every door in sports journalism. And a reputation for being the guy who could make any athlete squirm with his intellectual questions. Reid had spent his entire career building this image. He was the thinking man's sports writer, the one who didn't just report on games. He analyzed the deeper meaning, the historical context, the intellectual framework that casual fans couldn't understand. Tonight, he had one goal: to expose what he saw as the fraud of modern sports celebrity. In his mind, LeBron James was just another athlete who got lucky with genetics. Sure, he could play basketball, but real understanding? Academic depth? That was Reid's territory. Meanwhile, LeBron James sat quietly in the makeup chair. But there was something different about his demeanor tonight. His usual pre-interview small talk was replaced by a focused silence. Makeup artists noticed he kept checking his phone, scrolling through what looked like documents? Research papers. "You seem really prepared tonight, LeBron," one of the crew members mentioned casually. LeBron looked up with that strange gleam in his eyes, as if he was hiding a secret. "You could say that," he replied with a slight smile that would make perfect sense in about 20 minutes. What nobody in that studio knew was that LeBron had been preparing for this exact type of confrontation for years. Not this specific interview, but this type of intellectual challenge. He'd been waiting for someone to underestimate him in exactly this way. As the cameras rolled and the interview began, everything seemed normal. Standard questions about the Lakers' performance, upcoming playoffs, LeBron's leadership style. Reid was cordial, professional, setting up what he thought would be his intellectual trap. But if you watched carefully, and millions of people would replay this moment later, you could see Reid's subtle condescension building. The way he emphasized certain words, the slight smirk when he asked about basketball IQ, the tone that suggested he was talking to someone who might not understand big words. LeBron noticed it all. Every micro-expression, every subtle insult wrapped in professional courtesy. And he was keeping score. "Let me ask you something," LeBron said during a brief pause, looking directly at our viewers through the camera. "Has judging someone at first sight ever gotten you into trouble? Because you're about to see what happens when someone makes that mistake with the wrong person." "LeBron," Reid began, now dropping any pretense of respect, "you're undeniably great on the court, but the strategic depths of basketball history, these require years of academic study, rigorous research, intellectual frameworks that go far beyond athletic ability." The insult was clear. Reid wasn't just questioning LeBron's knowledge. He was questioning his intelligence, his capacity to understand anything beyond physical movement. LeBron's eyebrows furrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady. What exactly do you mean by real basketball knowledge, Marcus? Reid leaned back in his chair, completely confident now. This was his moment. Well, LeBron, there's playing the game, and then there's understanding the game. The historical evolution, the tactical innovations, the academic framework that explains why certain strategies work. These require scholarly analysis. You could feel the tension building in the studio. Camera operators exchanged glances. The host shifted uncomfortably. Everyone sensed that something was about to happen, but nobody expected what came next. And then Reid made his fatal mistake. The words that would haunt him forever. "You're just someone who bounces a ball around, LeBron. Don't try to learn basketball history from me." The studio went ice cold. You could literally hear the air conditioning humming because every human sound had stopped. Even the cameramen held their breath. In that moment, Reid had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But here's what's fascinating about this moment, and this is something that millions of viewers missed on first watch. If you look at LeBron's face frame by frame, there's no anger. There's no hurt. There's something much more dangerous. There's satisfaction. Like a chess master who just watched his opponent make the exact move he'd been hoping for. LeBron slowly leaned forward. The calm in his voice resembled the silence before a storm, and everyone in that studio could feel the atmospheric pressure changing. "Marcus," he said, letting the name hang in the air for just a moment longer than necessary. "Do you know what Red Auerbach said to Bill Russell in 1965? Reid's confident smirk began to flicker. This wasn't the response he expected. Which quote are you referring to? The game is won in the mind before it's played on the court. Now, most people watching at home thought this was just LeBron throwing out a famous basketball quote. But Reid, with all his supposed expertise, should have known that this wasn't just any quote. This was LeBron's opening move in what was about to become the most brutal intellectual destruction ever broadcast on live television. "But that's just the beginning, Marcus," LeBron continued, and then he did something that made everyone in the studio lean forward. He pulled out his phone. Now, pulling out your phone during a live interview is usually considered rude, unprofessional. But something about the way LeBron did it, with such deliberate purpose, made it clear this wasn't a distraction. This was a weapon. "This," LeBron said, turning the screen toward the camera so millions of viewers could see, "are Red Auerbach's never-before-published handwritten notes. The Auerbach family gave me special access to their private archives." Reid's jaw dropped, and I mean literally dropped. You can watch the replay. His mouth fell open like someone had just told him gravity was optional. "Special access?" Reid stammered, and for the first time that night, his Harvard confidence was showing cracks. "Marcus," LeBron said, his voice now carrying the quiet authority of someone who had been underestimated one too many times. "For the past 15 years, I've conducted basketball history research every single offseason. Not as a hobby, not casually, as a serious academic pursuit." Each word was hitting Reid like a physical blow. But LeBron wasn't finished. "Harvard Archives. Where you got your degree, right, Marcus? Yale's private collections. The Basketball Hall of Fame's restricted documents. The Naismith Memorial Archives that most scholars never get access to." By now, Reid was visibly sweating. Camera operators were zooming in because they could see the story changing in real time. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a masterclass being taught by someone who was supposed to be the student. Have you read Professor Harold Morrison's 1923 paper on the mental game of basketball? Reid's face went completely pale. Professor Morrison? I'm not familiar with... "Oh, it's perfectly understandable that you haven't read it, Marcus," LeBron said with devastating calm, "because this paper was only discovered in Yale's archives last month, and I was one of the first people in the world to read it. Let me pause here for a moment and help you understand what was happening." Reid had just been caught completely off guard by academic research that he, the supposed expert, had never even heard of. But this wasn't just about one paper. LeBron continued. Morrison was a student of Dr. James Naismith himself, the inventor of basketball. His 1923 research predicted modern defensive rotations with mathematical precision. He calculated optimal shooting angles that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream basketball until the 1990s. Reid was now completely defenseless. As a bead of sweat rolled down from his forehead to his cheek, he stammered, How is this even possible? I mean, have you ever been cornered like this? LeBron asked, looking directly at the camera, speaking to millions of viewers. Have you ever watched someone's entire worldview crumble in real time? Put yourself in Reid's shoes for a moment. But LeBron wasn't done. What happened next would be replayed on every sports show for months. Marcus, since you mentioned academic rigor, let me share something with you. I didn't just read Morrison's paper. I traced his research methodology. I visited the original gymnasium where Naismith taught. I spent 3 weeks in Springfield, Massachusetts, going through documents that most basketball historians don't even know exist. The camera caught Reid's hands trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. I've also collaborated with MIT's Sports Analytics Lab on a project analyzing how basketball strategy evolved during World War II. You see, when most college players were overseas, the game had to adapt. Coaches started using different mathematical approaches. Each revelation was like watching someone pull rabbit after rabbit out of a hat. Except these rabbits were exploding Reid's assumptions about who LeBron James really was. And Marcus, LeBron said, leaning even closer. Last summer, I presented my research on tactical evolution in post-integration basketball at the annual Society for American Baseball Research Conference. Not as LeBron James the basketball player, as LeBron James the researcher. The atmosphere in the studio had completely shifted. What started as Reid's intellectual ambush had become his public intellectual education. Camera operators were frantically signaling to keep rolling because they knew they were witnessing television history. Marcus? LeBron said, finally standing up. The anger in his voice had given way to something much more powerful. Understanding mixed with disappointment. I'm not saying this to humiliate you. I'm saying this because basketball isn't just a physical game. It's an art, a science, a mathematical formula, a psychological study, and a historical document all rolled into one. Reid had completely bowed his head. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You're right, LeBron. I made assumptions. Terrible assumptions. LeBron placed his hand on Reid's shoulder, and this gesture, this moment of grace after intellectual domination, would become one of the most replayed clips in sports media history. You're a good writer, Marcus. You have genuine talent and real knowledge. But real wisdom means understanding that knowledge can come from unexpected places. Some of the smartest people I know never set foot in an Ivy League classroom. And then something completely unexpected happened. Something that would change both of their lives forever. Marcus, LeBron said, sitting back down, if you'd like, I can share my research with you. All of it. 15 years of work. Because the story of basketball's intellectual evolution deserves to be told by someone who can write as well as you can. The offer hung in the air like a miracle. Reid looked up, tears actually forming in his eyes. You would do that? After what I just said to you? That's exactly why I'd do it, LeBron replied. Because you just learned something tonight that most people never learn. That being wrong isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of wisdom.